Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Sunday, January 7th, 2023, and today we are going to be talking about CNN's brand new electoral map that they released that shows their prediction for the 2024 presidential election. Now, every presidential election year, CNN, Fox News, the major news networks come out with a 270 electoral vote to win map, one that they help us understand where they see the election going and what their experts ultimately come up with in terms of an electoral map. And with this surprise drop that came just yesterday, it was one or 2 days ago, one that we didn't really expect to see, but one that I think we are very happy that we did, helps put things into perspective about where the mainstream media believes the current state of the election is and what it might be come this November. Now, I want to preface this video by saying that in this article they released, they believe that this is a current snapshot in time. It is not based particularly on just polls, but rather a culmination of things with campaign managers, congressional candidates, congressional people themselves, people in and outside of campaigns, polls, of course, fundraising numbers, historical election data. All of this seems to amount to what they believe is their current map for 270 electoral votes to win that shows Donald Trump in a position to win the White House. And now, personally, I do not find myself fundamentally opposed to the fact that Donald Trump is the favorite to win the White House right now. If any of you have seen my most recent election prediction between President Biden and President Trump, you'll know that I have President Trump winning 291 electoral votes to Joe Biden's 247. So, of course, I do right now believe that if the election was held today, that Donald Trump would win another 4-year term. And clearly, CNN also agrees as such. But it is the way that they get to the 270 electoral votes, combined with the rest of their map and their margins, that really put me in a bit of a worrisome view when I look at their overall electoral map. So in this video, we're going to be spending time unpacking their electoral map, comparing it to mine, which I just showed you, and comparing it to the general state of the nation, and why I believe that while this map is right in terms of its eventual winner, it is wrong in its approach to get there. And so, let this video begin. So we start off with 272 electoral votes to Donald Trump, 225 to Joe Biden, and 3 toss-up states: Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Arizona. And now these are 3 states that I was at in Nebraska 2nd District. 3 states and a congressional district that I do agree are going to be competitive in 2024, and states that Democrats and Republicans are going to be spending hundreds of millions of dollars in fighting over in this upcoming election. In fact, Forbes predicts that the 2024 election in its entirety will amount to over $10 billion spent, the most expensive election cycle that would triumph 2020, which was and currently stands as our most expensive election cycle, with triumph 2016, which currently back then was the most expensive election cycle. You see how this goes. More money ends up in politics, but that's not the point of this video. The point of this video is unpacking a map like this, where you have the swing states, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Arizona, and the rest of the states already characterized for which political party they are going to go to. Now, there might be some very big shocking states on this map that you, or shocks in the states that you really didn't expect to see for CNN's electoral map. I think for one, many people on the right expected CNN to increase the likelihood of a Biden victory, including releasing an electoral map that they believe that Joe Biden is on track to win the election. I think it took a lot of Republicans by surprise in a positive way that CNN does believe that Donald Trump is on the pathway to win re-election. On the flip side of things, I think Democrats saw this, and while they see it as something that definitely coincides with a lot of the data that we are seeing nationwide, a lot of this changes from the 2020 election we are also experiencing, that combined with a number of factors too, with President Biden being down in terms of approval, down in terms of fundraising numbers, down in terms of the overall media attention on him and his administration's victories, things along those lines. I don't think they're necessarily surprised by the fact that Donald Trump is in the lead, but again, by the avenue at which we get there. And I think I'm more on that boat. I think right now, regardless of how you feel about CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, the mainstream media networks, they're generally going to come up with a very general conclusion about who they believe the election is going to go to. And right now, they believe if the election was held today, it would go to Donald Trump. But let's take a look at some of the states that they give to Donald Trump and why I'm opposed to some of the calls that they make on this map and why I think it could be improved upon and why my map, I think, honestly, is a better outlook and a better current snapshot of where the country is today than CNN's overall. And I have a lot of respect for CNN's political wing. I have a lot of respect for how they go through elections, but I just fundamentally find myself opposed to the way that this map is drawn for a variety of different reasons. So to start off with, we have some states that the Republican Party and the Democratic Party are pretty locked down for, but I don't necessarily think a safe characterization is absolutely warranted. For instance, on the Republican side, we have states like Iowa and Ohio and Texas, states that we probably know are going to be narrower than 10 points, but are still probably going to go to the GOP. I do think that it makes sense if you were to use a margin that was roughly around, 5+ points to consider it to be a safe state, but I don't think that's where these states are going to go. Nor do I think it's fair to characterize states like Iowa, Ohio, and Texas to be safe red when you have states on the flip side of things for the Democratic Party, like Oregon, Colorado, New Mexico, that are lean blue rather than safe blue. And the reason why I say that is because looking at my map for the 2024 election, I find Iowa, Ohio, Texas to be characterized in the same way you would Colorado, New Mexico, Virginia, and Oregon, even included in this map, really jumps out to me as a huge shock. And the reason for that is because Oregon in specific is one that I never really expected to even be touched by mainstream media members, especially CNN politics, right? I think Oregon is a state that, taking it out, the rest of this map could theoretically be defended by, whoever is drawing this map. But Oregon in itself is just inherently not a competitive state. In the 2020 election, Joe Biden won it by roughly 16 points. In 2016, it went to Hillary Clinton by a margin of 11 points. In 2012, it went to Obama by 12. In 2008, it went to Obama by 16. Even in 2004, when John Kerry and Al Gore found some very competitive races in Oregon, they still ended up winning it. The last time it went red was all the way back in 1984, Ronald Reagan's 49-state victory, and even then it only went to Reagan by around 12 points. So history tells us that Oregon is absolutely a Democratic state, and the most recent election shows that it's a Biden plus 16 state. So to already characterize it as one that is a lean Democratic state really strikes me as an inaccurate prediction, and one that I simply cannot get behind. I also think it strikes out to me that states like Michigan have already been characterized in favor of the GOP, in contrast with Arizona, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania as toss-ups. But these three states in particular are ones that President Biden won by narrower margins than, get this, Michigan. And so I think a variety of different factors here really jump out to me. And so moving on beyond Colorado, New Mexico, Oregon, Virginia, Minnesota, which all states I think are more better fit in the likely column. But honestly speaking, Oregon, Colorado, New Mexico, and Virginia could also be safe states based on the metric that they are using for Iowa, Ohio, and Texas. I think that's really where I would see the states moving over to. I think that's a fairer characterization of them. We can now move over to, again, the state of Michigan, which I do have my qualms for being in the Republican column already. I think that while it does make sense that Michigan would be a state that Trump can win and might win today, I don't think that he will, but I think it'll be very, very close, it doesn't make sense to already characterize it as a Republican state. Looking at my own map here, we have Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Arizona already as red states that are further to the right than the state of Michigan. And I think that absolutely makes sense looking at electoral history and looking at the past few elections. For instance, in 2020, we can see that Arizona went to Biden by 0.3, Georgia went to Biden by 0.2, Wisconsin by 0.6, Pennsylvania by 1.2, and Michigan went by 2.8. Even in 2016, Georgia went to Trump by 5, Arizona by 4, Pennsylvania by 0.7, Wisconsin by 0.8, Michigan, though, 0.2. And so when I look at this map here, and I look at the election results, consistently it seems that Michigan is the most left-wing state. In 2012, disregard Arizona and Georgia because they weren't competitive at the time, but Wisconsin is Obama plus 7, Pennsylvania is Obama plus 5, and Michigan is Obama plus 10. In 2008, Wisconsin is Obama plus 14. That's going to be a hard one to beat. Pennsylvania is Obama plus 10. But guess what? Michigan does beat it. Obama plus 17. And so when you look at the election results and you look at how close these races are, you see that Michigan almost routinely is almost the always safest Democratic state out of the three. Knowing that, it makes no sense that Michigan would be a state that is a lean Republican state. Even in the most recent election, 2012, where Michigan had a governor's race, Gretchen Whitmer won it by 11 points. Wisconsin only went blue by 3, and Pennsylvania, sure by 15, but knowing the candidate quality, that one made a lot less sense. And looking at the Senate, that was more of a fleshed out match here, where you can see that Pennsylvania is just inherently a closer state than the state of Michigan. And so seeing Michigan already in the Republican column really strikes me as a surprising call here. I think it would have made more sense to characterize Arizona, to characterize Wisconsin, to characterize Pennsylvania, because they already did so in North Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. Now, I think Florida also is a state where you could see this as a safe red state. So Michigan and Florida, I think, would move in opposite directions if I was to draw the map. Florida would become more red, Michigan would become more blue, but really in the toss-up column. Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Arizona, I can also see the backing for why it's a toss-up state, but given the characterization of Michigan, if it realistically was a lean red state, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Arizona would already be red, and now you're talking about expanding into states like New Hampshire. But that's not the case of where the country is today. Michigan is not the most lopsided state out of the big three, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, nor is it expected to vote to the right of Arizona. That's a big shock. Nor is it expected to be as Republican as North Carolina and Georgia, and honestly speaking, Florida. It never made much sense to characterize those states altogether, which is why, again, I disagree with a lot of the fundamentals on this map. Now, looking at the remainder of the map, I already told you what I really wanted to take away from this map here. Iowa and Ohio and Texas were closer states. North Carolina, I think the characterization could make sense. I would have it there right now. Georgia and Arizona, though they do share characterization, I do not think would be as favorable to the GOP. I think North Carolina would be more pro-Trump than Georgia and Arizona. So if Arizona's a toss-up state, I would also say Georgia is as well. But you see that this map here on your screen, I honestly think it makes a lot more sense than the one that CNN put out. And while it does give us an indication about where the mainstream media believes this race is going to go, I honestly am quite disappointed with the map that they put out. I really don't think this speaks to where the state of the nation is today, and that's a problem because it means there's a disconnect between the high-level political analysts and what is actually happening on the ground. Because sure, it may come from a point of, self-importance or self-righteousness to say that my map is better than the one that CNN put out. But I think almost everyone can agree that a lot of these ratings simply do not make sense. It never made sense to make states like Colorado, New Mexico as lean blue. But even then, Oregon is a huge stretch. It never made sense to characterize states like Michigan alongside the same characterization of states like Florida. Michigan went to the Democrats by 11 in 2022, Florida to the Republicans by 20. How in the world do they share a characterization? That simply is not the case. And so looking at our electoral map here, while I do think a lot of insight and understanding of the electoral process does go into a lot of the background on these maps, sometimes they can come up short. And I think this is a perfect case of that. I normally love to analyze electoral maps that are released and electoral forecasts that do generally give us an amazing understanding of where elections are and what the political pundits genuinely have to contribute to this ever-evolving conversation about who's going to win the upcoming election. But in this specific case, I'm afraid it fell short. And I think there are ways to improve upon it, and they do recognize that this map isn't perfect, and that this map is not a predictor of what will actually happen in November. But honestly speaking, I think this is something that is a bit more on the side of malpractice in terms of releasing a map such as this one. Nevada even being a lean red state is something that I don't agree with. I have it as a blue state in my map, but that one's a little bit more tame. I only pointed it out right now because I forgot to mention it when I was looking through the video, or when I was talking earlier on in the video. But overall, I look at this map and I say that there are some significant improvements that can be made from it. It gives us a bit of an understanding of, or maybe the pundits think this race is going to go and where the electoral map is from the CNN politics standpoint, but I simply don't agree with it. I think as we move forward and take a look at our future electoral maps and where we believe the state of the country is today, we have to put a lot of thought and effort into how we characterize these states, because I don't think it's fair to be all willy-nilly about some of these characterizations, knowing that there's a lot on the line and a lot of what we're talking about here is decided in a lot of key battleground states, and the characterizations that are given to them hold quite significance in terms of what battleground states are going to be focused on by either political party, what matters for the upcoming election, and what people like you, viewers, and people who watch CNN, Fox, MSNBC, pay attention to in this upcoming election cycle, and what states are targeted, again, by voters who seem to care about elections in a very, very strong fashion. Now, I'm not here to say that my map is perfect, but I am here to call out maps that I don't necessarily agree with, and I think there are fundamental flaws in it, and I think CNN is exactly that. I do think there are merits in it, though. If I was to say there are things that I agreed with, I'd say fundamentally that it makes sense to keep states like North Carolina in the lean Republican column. I would say, based on my map, sure, that Georgia could be a Republican state. I also think they need to add in likely characterizations. I don't think it's fair to just say safe and lean, right? That's never the way to go, because at the end of the day, there are some states that are in between that can shift between now and November, and characterizing them as safe, and then all of a sudden they end up in another column on election day is a bit more tricky to handle. I think generally speaking, they have a lot of it right, but I think when it comes down to a lot of these swing states, I'm not thoroughly impressed by CNN in this map. And I hate to say it because normally I love a lot of the content and the political analysis that they put out, but I think on this metric alone, we really don't see much in terms of substance from their inaugural Road to 270 map that sure is right in its conclusion that Donald Trump is in a position to win the White House and the favorite presently, but again, the avenue getting there has a lot of flaws that certainly need to be improved upon. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below, subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for 2024 presidential election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.